Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. I'm your chair, Councillor Rachel Carnack. The role of this committee is to scrutinise performance and take a closer look at topics of interest across the Council services, making recommendations to Cabinet where necessary. The committee also deals with the call-in of Cabinet decisions and decides whether these decisions should be referred back to the decision maker to think again, which is something we're doing tonight. We do rarely and only when we feel it's important to do so. Also present this evening, we have the leader, Councillor Alan Baldock, and Councillor Lee Castle, who's Cabinet Member for Property and IT, who may be asked questions by the members of this committee during the course of the debate. Just some housekeeping. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at the Tower House car park. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being minuted and filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you to where to sit. The Westgate garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass doors. Right, okay, we've got through all of that again. Apologies for absence, please, Andrea.
We have apologies from Councillors Bland and Worley tonight.
And substitute members.
We have Councillor Mellish here as a substitute for Councillor Worley.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest by members or officers? Do you have any, Andrea? Do we have? Nope. Do we have any? Nope. Okay. Public participation. We have one public speaker for the meeting who will be heard directly before the item. And then move on now to rules of procedure and invite Jan Geiler, who's Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer, to explain the rules of procedure for tonight. Thank you, Jan.
So the call-in rules of procedure are set out in our constitution at part 6.3 and they are provided at item 5 at pages 6 and 9. I will summarise the key points for this evening. The criteria to be met for a call-in to be valid are that the call-in needs to be submitted by at least 3 members. It has to be received by a certain deadline as set out in those rules. It specifies which decision is being objected to and gives reasons for the call-in request. This call-in was considered by me as monitoring officer and was deemed to be valid. There was no consideration of the merits of the call-in at this stage, but rather it is a tick box exercise, and if all the information needed has been provided, it is valid. When a call-in request is deemed valid, the decision may not be implemented until the Scrutiny Committee has met to consider the called-in decision. Following a debate this evening, the committee may come to one of 3 conclusions. 1, that the challenge to the decision should be taken no further and the decision may be implemented. Or 2, that the decision is contrary to the budget or policy framework and should therefore be referred to the Council. The Scrutiny Committee must set out its reasoning for Council to consider the matter. And lastly, the third option, that the matter should be referred back to the decision maker for reconsideration. The Scrutiny Committee again must give reasoning for the decision maker to consider.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan. So, yes, this is the call-in of willed and conditioned decision made by Cabinet on 8th of December 2025, minute 454. And I'd also like to mention that we have officers here from planning. So we have Simon Thomas, who's Head of Planning, and we have Andy Thompson, who is, what is Andy's?
It's a bit of a mouthful, I'm afraid. It's Lead Corporate Policy and Strategy Manager.
Oh, well, yeah, couldn't expect me to remember that then, could you? No. And so thank you both for being here this evening as well. So I know Jan's just outlined that, but I just want to also remind the committee that we are all here to scrutinise the report that went to Cabinet on 8th of December and the decision that was made by Cabinet on that date, and to consider the request for a review of that decision, taking into account the Casey advice note issued on 6th of January, which is included in the agenda pack. So this isn't a meeting to debate the motion again. That's quite, you know, I hope that's clear to everyone, because I know quite a lot of you haven't taken part in a call-in before. We are here specifically to tackle these specific areas. And I also just wanted to say that we, in this committee, I think we're all proud of the fact that we hold this council to account in a very systematic and positive way. We obviously all represent different parties, but we're usually free from politicking and grandstanding in this committee. And I know that there's been a lot on social media recently about all of this. So I hope this evening that we can look at this quite forensically and debate it and come up with the decision without having to play those Facebook battles here in this chamber, because we are here to represent our residents and make sure that we're doing the best for them rather than promoting our own political feelings. So I'm sorry if you feel that's a bit sort of headmistressly this evening, but I just felt that I wanted to say that. So we have one public speaker who will be heard at the start of the item. That's Councillor Keith Bothwell. And I will ask you to speak in a little bit. Following the speaker, we have three options open to us: that the challenge to this decision should be taken no further and the decision should be implemented, or that the decision is contrary to the budget or policy framework and should therefore be referred to the council. In such a case, as we can set out our reasoning for the council to consider, or that the matter should be referred back to the decision maker for reconsideration, and that would be back to Cabinet, and that we must set out our reasoning for that as well. So as we go through, you will need to come up with recommendations, and we will vote on that. I will then ask Councillor Turnbull to summarise the main points of her review case, and then we'll move to ask Councillors Baldock and Castle and lead officers Simon Thomas and Andrew Thompson to make their comments, and then I will open the debate. So just so that you're all clear on that process, hopefully we'll get it more or less right. If we don't, I've got Jan here on my left, and I know she'll point us all if we're going wrong. So can I invite Keith Bothwell, please, to speak? Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm speaking as the councillor who originally proposed the Wealden condition motion at Council on the 30th of October, and therefore have a strong interest in the outcome of the motion passed that day. The substantive clause of the motion, which was passed unanimously, called for an urgent report into the viability of implementing the Wealden condition in this district. I was frankly both surprised and very disappointed with the report that was produced and the subsequent decision on that report taken by Cabinet. I will explain why. I was expecting a robust report investigating the pros and cons of implementing the Wealden condition. I had hoped for a case study or two reporting on how the condition had been implemented at Wealden District Council, and a report of consultations with officers from Wealden District Council, as well as consultations with Southern Water and maybe developers too, on their views on the practical implications of imposing the condition. I was hoping that the report might provide guidance for members of the Planning Committee on when and where the condition might be applied, identifying development types that would be appropriate and others where it might not be. What we got instead was a report full of errors and deviations from the main thrust of the motion. Specifically, the report to Cabinet makes the spurious implication several times that the motion was calling for the blanket imposition of Wealden condition to all planning consents, and that the Council should impose conditions on the Planning Committee. In fact, the motion nowhere and in no way suggested that it should be imposed as a blanket condition, nor that the Council should direct the Planning Committee. It also contains significant errors, such as claiming that Southern Water have never indicated in relation to any planning application or local plan policy that the sewerage system is currently inadequate. However, a cursory review of just one recent application for the development of the Hill in Littlebourne reveals the opposite. In that case, Southern Water clearly state there is inadequate capacity within the foul sewerage network to accommodate the development. I appreciate that officers are stretched and that the production of a feasibility report takes time, but they would have had more time to spend on the salient points if they hadn't been distracted by red herrings, looking into the respective roles of planning and council, spurious references to blanket conditions, and inaccurate assertions regarding Southern Water's responses to consultations. This was an opportunity for Council to clearly identify tools and actions that we can use to turn back the tide of sewage spilling into our rivers and seas on a daily basis, an issue that is of acute concern for our residents. That opportunity has been thrown away. Instead, we got a largely meaningless and inaccurate report and decision, which is clearly not fit for purpose, and no clear guidance on the way forward to a sewage-free future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bothwell. Can I now invite Councillor Turnbull, please, to introduce the review request and summarise the main points? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for attending tonight to discuss this. Just to reiterate a couple of points that Councillor Bothwell has just made to make sure they're perfectly clear to avoid them distracting us in our debate this evening. The motion did not imply that a blanket condition should be imposed on all developments, as the KC letter in the reports pack also states was made clear at the council meeting where the motion was discussed. And the motion did not ask nor imply that Cabinet should direct the LPA to take a particular course of action. So following publication of the decision relating to the motion made at the Cabinet meeting of the 8th of December, published on the 16th of the 12th, I, along with councillors Rachel Carnac, Peter Old and 5 other councillors, asked that the Scrutiny Committee call in this decision. The Wealden motion was brought to the council, as we've heard, by Keith Bothwell, seconded by Peter Old, referred to the planning condition, which is used by other councils to ensure that adequate water treatment infrastructure is in place before new homes are occupied. The motion concluded, this council urges the Cabinet to commission an urgent report into the viability of implementing the so-called Wealden planning condition as a tool for tackling the problem of sewage pollution in this district. The motion was unanimously supported at the council meeting after considerable debate. A report was taken to Cabinet on the 8th of December, and the resolution from this report was to agree to receive regular updates from Southern Water about the implementation of the environmental measures contained in its 2005 to 2030 asset management plan. And Cabinet voted to support that resolution. I set out 3 reasons for the call-in of this decision. 1, the report presented to the Cabinet misrepresents the motion put to Council by stating, or at least strongly implying, that the motion requested a blanket imposition of a planning condition on all applications. As we've already heard, the motion merely asked for a report into the viability of implementing this condition as a tool. It does not ask for this to be applied as a blanket condition and does not ask Cabinet to direct the LPA to do so. Second point, the resolution presented in the report does not reflect the discussions given in the report. The report discusses the local planning authority as though it is not part of the council. It is part of the council, although it operates separately. It is the planning committee. Given the line of argument in the report, a better representation of the matter at hand, which better represents the spirit of the motion, would have been along the lines of, to agree to ask the local planning authority to discuss this condition and determine whether it could be applied to applications for development in the Canterbury district. My third point was the report does not indicate that any attempts have been made to seek the opinions of key stakeholders who would be affected by this condition, such as Southern Water and developers working in our district. Also, while the report does discuss the Grampian condition, which is similar to the Wealden condition, it does not give confidence that thorough research has been done into the application of this condition in practice. For example, the proposer provided contact details for planning officers at Wealden Council in the expectation that the head of planning would seek their views and advice on how the condition was being implemented and its impact in order to be able to fully inform Cabinet on these implications. The Casey letter refers to this as seeking their help. The motion did not suggest that our planning department needed help in understanding the condition. It just suggested that it would be helpful to know how the condition was working in practice, which it was thought would assist this council's LPA in considering its use, as Councillor Bothwell has described. The call-in request stated that this rationale met two of the required criteria to justify a call-in as stated in section 3.2 of the Constitution. That is, inadequate consultation with stakeholders prior to the decision, for example, Southern Water and developers, and inadequate evidence on which to base the decision, for example, discussions with Wealden and other councils employing similar conditions. The monitoring officer deemed that the required conditions were met, as we've heard, along with the inclusion of requesting the attendance of relevant Cabinet members and officers who've joined us tonight. So the aim of this meeting then is to review the response to the motion before the implementation proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Can I now invite Councillor Baldock and Councillor Castle to make opening remarks, and then I will ask Simon Thomas, Head of Planning and Health, and Andrew Thompson, Lead Corporate Policy and Strategy Manager, to make opening remarks as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everyone. I suppose there's only a couple of things I just want to mention very early doors, really, before the debate gets going. I'd rather you feed into us. I don't want it to be us feeding to you, because everything's in the reports, and we have spoken about this at length. I think there's one key element missing, is that in Wealden, and today there's been a discussion around Oxford, and I appreciate the Chair saying this isn't a political issue, this is actually just a resident issue, is that in those two authorities, Southern Water have told the planning authority they have a problem with the connections. And I think that's where the reports are so important. And I think that's the main thing when we were coming to our decision about how we could move forward is, and I just wanted to note, linked to that, is we can't obviously instruct, as Councillor Turnbull mentioned, the planning authority. But Councillor Bothwell mentioned in his speech that he'd have liked us to tell the planning authority, i.e. the committee, some examples, but then also at the same time not direct them. So we've avoided that completely, and that is probably why we took that position, which may have seemed to do nothing. But fundamentally, we felt the report had the detail in it to explain the legal position, and obviously that's been followed up after. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Ball.
Yeah, again, I agree with Lee that we're here to listen and to answer questions that you have of us, rather than that. I would just point out, I think, that the motion as it was presented was read by me and read by others as being certainly the intention is it to be a blanket motion. And if I read it back to you, you would see exactly why I'm saying that. So, and I think that's an important point of view, because it starts the whole fundamental of this debate. And it simply says, you know, if you wrote this badly as a motion, then that's fine. But, you know, the point being that we can't interpret anything other than the motion as presented. And it says, as councillors from all political persuasions, we frequently face serious dilemmas considering planning applications. It goes on a bit about sewage infrastructure to cope with the increase of numbers of dwellings. In Canterbury District, major problems are the failing sewage treatment systems, both in the Stour washed area and the watershed. So two large areas of our district are mentioned in that piece of text, flowing into the North Kent coast. A solution to this has been adopted by Wealden District Council. We will see that again. This adds conditions to planning approvals for new developments that require the developer to A, determine whether existing sewage infrastructure is adequate and cope with, and then the other bits that you go on to there. I think that to me was so close to being a blanket decision, I think we were right to make that assumption. And Lee has already touched on the point there about instructing the local planning authority. So I don't think that was unjust. I think that was pragmatic, and clearly was the intention that you did that. If later on you changed your mind and you thought it was individual estates, then in fact I think the KC's report is very clear that as the debate went through that evening, we were open to the fact of you being clearer with us that it was a case-by-case basis. But your motion started from the precept that it was supposedly on every application, perhaps. So, and I think the KC was right to point out that nobody at the end of that debate was in any debate or any doubt that the motion or the essence of that motion as a condition could be applied case by case. And that, I think, is the important point that I feel needs to be raised at the beginning of this debate as well. So really, we left that debate at council, and at council, I should say, with that clear understanding of what was meant. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. And Simon or Andy, do you wish to say anything?
I don't think so at this stage, just obviously the report and the KC advice is there.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I will now open it up to debate. So anyone who has questions or points of clarification for either the cabinet members or the officers to respond, then please let me know. I would just respond, Councillor Baldock, and this might be my personal view, but I think that night was quite a tense night in council, and that it was very difficult to explain or turn that around, that there was a misunderstanding. And if you remember, we even had a break because it was getting quite contentious. So yeah, I think it was a difficult evening. I mean, others can say so. How that was mistaken, I'm not entirely sure, but I open it up now to others to come back. Yes, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of respond to those comments, Councillor Castle, you made the point about Southern Water has not said anything about capacity. We've got some other points on that, but just to respond initially to that, the Wealden condition effectively allows councils or planning authorities to put in conditions regardless of the fact that the water company has not said that there is no capacity. So that's what is different about it from a general Grampian condition, I think, is that it sort of offers and arguably there is other evidence. We know there's evidence because we can see, we know that there is that it is overcapacity. And another point, actually, I sit on the Southern Water Steering Group for the Swale Cliff Water Treatment Plant, the pathway that they call it, and several of us sit on that. And they have said in that meeting that they are upgrading the Swale Cliff plant to accommodate 35,000, a population of 35,000. However, looking back by 2030, when I looked back on one of their technical reports from 2022, they said that that plant already serves a population of 37,500. So they're upgrading to under capacity. So there is already evidence out there that they are that the capacity is not there. And for Councillor Baldock's point, you sort of laid out some of the things that we said in the preamble to the motion, and that really is why we asked or were hoping that some kind of discussion would be had with Wealden, so that our planning department and our planning team and our planning authority would be able to hear about how the condition was applied and how the condition played out in effect, and how they were how they were using it and how it was working in practice on the ground with developers and with water companies, so that we could be better informed. So those are just sort of a couple of comments back. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Obviously, this is a really complex topic. So if I take a pause between some of the questions, you understand, because my brain has been a bit fried the last few months. And obviously, you know that I've sat on the planning committee, and that site that Councillor Bothwell mentioned, the Hill, is a good example. It's in my ward, to make you aware, Chair. I think the one thing that you've mentioned is the evidence. We can all see that the outflows in the sea are there. That's not the problem. Is when we were reading the reports and how it was interpreted, I think you'd all agree, is as a statutory consultee, which they're not on all applications, Southern Water are not saying there's a problem, and that's the end of it. And that's the problem we have, and we know that from planning committee directly. So I think that's where we would just reinforce the information we would be given on the report. Yes, we could see as councillors, and we all can here today, that Southern Water aren't doing their job, South East Water, any Thames Water. But unfortunately, when it's going through the legal process of the planning committee, which is run at arm's length, maybe not categorically separately, you said, and that's maybe right, that isn't enforceable. And I think the other key element about the Wilden, and how I understand it, and I may be wrong and Simon may step in, is in the Wilden's case, Southern Water said there was an issue with connection to an application. It then was basically the developer said, I'm not happy with this, we're going to put this condition in and we're going to come up with an option, which is what we do on applications. So the Hill, for example, that was only for an outline permission. It didn't include sewage, it didn't include anything. That would have been done under reserve matters later. In the Wilden one, they've then come up with a plan for the sewage system or the surface water system, and they then said to the council, this is what we'd like to do. The council have said, we're not happy, and the developers then appealed it. So very case specific, and I think that's what's hard, and that's where it's become grade that we can do this. And I think the final point is that there's nothing to stop the committee doing it. They can at every application. So the Hill's a good example in that that was rejected by every member of the committee. But unfortunately, it's now gone to the planning inspectorate with a very low likelihood of being upheld. So I think it's sort of a bit of, it's trying to basically explain an encyclopedia in 3 sentences. It's such a vastly more complex matter. And I think that's, you know, I'd love to be able to say, and I said this to the leader before the meeting, we could all sit in our wards and say, yep, we'd like to put these conditions on, but if they don't hold the legal weight, then unfortunately we're just going to keep losing. And that's the problem. We can't just say it on a whim. There has to be the categoric legal advice, planning advice, the framework. It all has to be there. I think that's where the report tried to go into that detail. It maybe didn't address what people wanted from the motion, and I'm not going to disagree with the chair. Obviously, on the evening, it got maybe tetchy is probably the word. I'm not very good at politicking. I do say it a lot. And it did get a bit tetchy, and I didn't like that because it was a good motion, and I've said that when I was at Cabinet. You know, I'm not disagreeing with any of what the speakers have said. The difficulty is that we're trying to really funnel it into a very, very tight angle, and unfortunately with this topic we can't, and I think that's where we're getting, unfortunately, at the moment with some of these elements of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. And I mean, I think we all agree with you that this is a very complicated subject. Some of us have been, you know, or I think all of us have grappled with this, with various developments in our wards, and how do we tackle this? And it's something that's very, as we know, pertinent to our residents. So that is a fundamental reason why this was called in, because I think we were disappointed with some of the debate within Cabinet, that we thought that there might be a more serious debate of the issues. I don't want to be particularly critical there, but I just think, yeah, it is such a nuanced and difficult area that it deserves more from all of us, really, in how we look at doing this and whether we can do anything. I've been interested today on the social media that some Labour councillors have mentioned that there is a toolbox being worked on, and I wonder if you would be able to talk about this toolbox, because I think indeed that's something that we're all interested in. You know, it can't be blanket, but what is the toolbox that might be open to planning members of the planning committee? And I really feel that should be discussed with backbenchers rather than going out in the public domain on a Facebook page, basically. So I wonder, yes, you know, Leader, if you could give us the courtesy at all, or Councillor Castle, of explaining what you're looking at and how that could be used and supporting our planning members. Thank you.
I'll take that if you want. Yeah, I mean, we're thoughtful, and I think it reflects the fact that we are very mindful of the issues that we face and the complexity. I guess we were trying to be very clear that the planning committee could apply conditions, providing the conditions were sound enough. In other words, Southern Water had to say that they couldn't connect, along with other things as well. So I think our phrase that we were banging around as a conversation piece, really could be called anything really, is that the planning committee needs to be clear and understand what those blockers are, if you like, or if there's some conditions that we can apply and the conditions that need to be met, if that is the case, and probably some suitable wording for conditioning of applications. It's a piece of work, but I think we recognised as a cabinet that that piece of work was something that we should be looking at. We're also mindful that there's the legislation coming, the Reg 19 paperwork is just about on its completion now, if you could say that. And we've been dealing with this issue all the way through that, and that will become much clearer as those documents become public. So many of those things are addressed in one way or another there. Plus the fact the government has the infrastructure bill going through Parliament now, which again changes the framework that we are working in now. All of that. So this is a time when I think you can say that this government is being serious about tackling those problems that have been neglected for a very long time. We're serious in our local plan about tackling those problems, not by doing nothing, but actually by being proactive and working through these things. But also and that toolbox, if you like, is a bit of a guide. It's not produced yet. We are talking about that. Maybe it's a little bit premature to announce it in the way they were, but we definitely feel something in that line we've talked about, and I think with the planning team as well, with Andrew's mentioned it as well, we've talked about that a little bit. And we will share it with you as it develops over the next few weeks and months, I guess. Do you want to add anything to that, Andrew? If the chair, through the chair's permission, was that useful? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Yes, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I suppose just to build on that, obviously, the report set out that existing local plan policies, national planning policies, do provide an existing sort of tool, as it were, I suppose, where the evidence justifies that to be used on an individual planning application on a case-by-case basis. And as you rightly say, the new local plan coming through, following years of consultation on these issues, will look to sort of strengthen that within the district over the coming weeks through the Regulation 19 version. So there'll be slightly stronger sort of framework around early engagement with sewerage providers, utility providers and other infrastructure providers, and some of those sort of key messages that we've been hearing throughout the development of the local plan to be reflected in that Regulation 19 local plan. So the policy sort of framework is there to use on a case-by-case basis, but is also looking to be strengthened through the new local plan.
Thank you. And sorry, Councillor Mellish, for taking so long, but yes, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. No, sorry, no problem. It's good to hear what people have to say, and I think we should sort of that collegiate approach. And you're absolutely right. It is an extremely complicated situation that we're facing. And there was a lot of discussion at full council and also around the fringes in terms of the preamble to the resolution. And I say now it's a resolution, not a motion, because it was passed. And what we voted on in that resolution were the 5 points, because the proposed actually say, yeah, we are therefore proposing the following motion, and it was the four points. So let's focus on those in terms of saying, it said this council acknowledges the acute public concern regarding inadequate wastewater treatment and the negative impact of sewage pollution on local communities, and we agreed. There was no problem with that. This council acknowledges that additional house building will increase the strain on local water infrastructure and wastewater treatment capacity. Again, agreed. I don't see what the argument is there. This council will continue to exert pressure on water companies, water regulators and all other agencies to help address these concerns. Agreed, and is doing so. This council will also seek actions and potential solutions that you can implement to help tackle the problem, and agreed and is doing and will continue to do so. This council urges the Cabinet to commission an urgent report into the viability of implementing the so-called Wealden planning condition as a tool for tackling the problem of sewage pollution in this district. Agreed, and it has done so. Just so you don't like the outcome of that report. King's Counsel has said that the officer report to Cabinet is the report that full council asked the Cabinet to commission. The terms of the full council decision required a report on the viability of implementing the so-called Wealden planning condition and other strategy options as a tool for tackling the problem of sewage pollution in the district. And Cabinet did that. The report correctly sets out that the imposition of a planning condition on a planning application is a matter for the LPA, our planning committee, to decide on a case-by-case basis. It's quite clear, and that's part of the discussion we've already had. That is the correct legal approach, and it would be unlawful for the LPA to impose the Wealden condition on every development where it involves the need for foul drainage, without regard to the particular circumstances of each case. The movers of the motion, or the resolution I should say, movers of the resolution were evidently unclear whether they intended a blanket condition or a case-by-case application. If it was a case-by-case, then the members on planning committee have a clear indication of what they were required to do at every appropriate application heard by the committee. If not, write a better motion next time. Be clear about your intentions and stop wasting members' time and ratepayers' money. The preamble was very interesting, but it's not the motion. It's not what you asked the council to do. Let's be very clear on that. So it's the points I've already highlighted. Are those calling in the decision of Cabinet saying they have a greater legal mind in the case engaged by the Cabinet? If that is the case, then perhaps the movers of the resolution can put their money where their mouth is and engage counsel of their own if they think they can get a different outcome, which they will not. I suggest this is, and I'm trying not to be political here, as you urge, Sage, but it does seem like a bit of a publicity stunt and preys on real concerns for this council and the people of our district. This council will continue to do all it can to protect the health and welfare of our people, our seas and our inland waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Schoolboy. Quite a few people have said tonight that it's a complicated situation. I think it is, but I'll try and make it as very simple as I can. I wasn't at the meeting. I wasn't a councillor when the meeting discussed this, and from what I've heard tonight, I'm glad I wasn't. It sounds it was heated, and perhaps some messages got lost. I sort of take exception though to the comment that write a better motion. The motion was what it was, and what we were asking for was an investigation into it. What that investigation could have come up with was you can't do this, but you can do that. But what it came up with was you can't do this. It didn't open the door to what could be done. If the report had said our interpretation was that you were going to seek a blanket conditions, and you can't do that. However, you can do this, and if you like, provide an enabling solution. That would have been something that I think we could have lived with. I fully accept that maybe there were some ambiguities in that report, in the motion, but the opportunity when the officer's report was being written was to iron those out. We've mentioned tonight about briefly the West Oxfordshire District Council application of Grampian conditions, and that's very clear. Everything that's been written about that has been in some circumstances. It's certainly not in every case, and it's certainly not a blanket. And the conditions that they are applying, those Grampian conditions, are very specific. So, for example, something that isn't in their draft local plan, where there's been no pre-assessment of infrastructure increases. So it's new things coming along. And I'll just quote something that they say. This is something that West Oxfordshire District Council says. West Oxfordshire District Council will consult the water company, Thames Water in this case, on development proposals, and if there is a concern regarding sewage capacity, will work with the water company to agree an appropriate planning condition depending on the specific circumstances of the case. all we were looking for from our proposal was something that could be similar transported to Canterbury. Undertake a viability assessment of how do we get to that position. And we didn't get that. We got something very different from that. And I think the question I'd like to put back is how do we get back into that position?
Thank you. Do you want to?
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I think the key thing I wrote down there, apologies, because obviously the key element of the Oxfordshire one is if there's any concerns from the water company. And I suppose I'll go back to my original point. Here we're being told there are no concerns. On individual cases we might. So there isn't really a way to go back to you and say, here's a positive way to stop development so residents are happy that we're stopping building because we're trying to improve the pollution. Because fundamentally, that's what you're roundabout asking, let's be honest. And I think that's the frustrating thing, because I agree with you. I'd love to be able to do that. The Hill's a good example, you know, brilliant, a win. Unfortunately, we can't just be seen to do what looks good. We have to, unfortunately, meet the protocol. So I think maybe the report, you're right, didn't say what can we do, but the report doesn't need to say what can we do to put in a condition to stop houses. And in Oxfordshire, for example, I think they've got 1,000 houses in the article I remember reading that are stopped because the water company have said they can't connect. So that's 1,000 houses that in essence are acceptable in everything but the water system. And here we're not being told that. I think that's the repetitive line through the reports that we've had. And I think that's where it feels like you're asking, in essence, for us as Cabinet and as a council and all councillors to come back to you and say, fundamentally, the elephant in the room is we'd like to stop building, because that's what it would be. And I think that's why they're doing it. You know, both those councils, Wilden and Oxfordshire, have done that for that reason. Rightly or wrongly, you know, and that's not to be political, but unfortunately here we're in presumption, we've got a current local plan, we've got a draft going through, and so I suppose I'd need you to quantify maybe what you'd want from us, in the sense of you'd want planning committee, you said the words options, to be able to do the same as them, which is fundamentally saying stop building, even though Southern Water here are telling us that they haven't got a problem. And I know there is anecdotal evidence and evidence from other committees and evidence from the tankers in Whitstable, in Littlebourne, in the Nailbourne, everywhere, that we have got a problem with the water system. But unfortunately, we're not being told that through the formal process. That's how I interpret it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Castle. Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, we don't want to get too deep into the, you know, the wherefores and whatevers of the motion, because we're dealing with the Cabinet decision here. I take your point in a way, some of it, Councillor Mellish. I think then, you know, the answer might be on the night at council to say the motion needs rewriting, you know, figure like at that point. I've had it done to me at council and, you know, I've taken it on the chin, but, you know, we're not all great at writing motions or writing the best motions, but if that might be one. Yeah, exactly. We don't all have that, fortunately or unfortunately. Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Costa. I actually don't think that's what anybody generally is talking about, not building, because we've had years of not building thanks to Stodmarsh, and I think actually we all want to find a solution to stop. We've all wanted for years to find a solution to Stodmarsh. We don't want to be in presumption because it's the worst thing for us. That's not what we're talking about. But I think, you know, Councillor Rold, when he spoke to Cabinet, what he talked were the circumstances where developers and water companies are falling short of their responsibilities and the problem with pollution. And I think that is what we don't feel Cabinet addressed that at the Cabinet meeting. And certainly I think in the option, in the supported option, which was to agree regular updates from Southern Water, ensure councillors are aware of the progress of implementation of the environmental enhancements being carried out by Southern Water under the AMP process. I think, yes, that is sort of an answer, but it didn't go far enough and it's not strong enough. And we already have that pretty much from some of the other water motions that have gone through over the years. So I think that is one of the areas that we're questioning, that we actually would like that to be would have liked that to have been more robust and to have also tackled the area that you've talked about earlier and the leader has talked about in terms of the toolbox and what options there are open to us. But before I come to Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Watkins.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, to your point, I do mainly want to speak about the future, but as there is something quite unusual about the kind of history of this, I did want to raise one point here. I mean, I've been a councillor for a while on 2 councils, and I've never seen a KC report before. And I was very surprised to see that actually it addressed what I consider to be a political thing. I mean, there's some good stuff in it, don't get me wrong, but you know, a part of this is talking about, was it blanket request or was it not? I mean, by the time the proposers had brought in their call-in motion here, it was absolutely clear, been clear for ages, that we're not talking about a blanket policy. You're talking about case by case. Where we asked, and I've looked her up, an excellent KC is probably very expensive to spend time talking about in the report, investigating whether it was a blanket request or was it not. I mean, absolutely obvious by the time it was call-in. And I don't like, I mean, someone earlier, I think Councillor Medish there said, oh, you know, what are you doing spending money? I mean, I feel like, what are we doing spending money getting the KC to look at that part of all of this? It just doesn't seem important to me. It's like raking over old coals, or whatever the expression is. But looking forward, I do have a couple of points, and I think we're all agreeing, actually, everyone is agreeing, all the reports agree, that we can use the Wilden condition on occasion if the evidence supports it, and that's good. And I thank all the people who've brought forward this debate. I think that is helpful. I think to Councillor Bothwell, when he spoke, made one really good point. The report that came forward from officers, I don't think it does do a great job of being a kind of how-to guide. I think it's useful, but I think it could have a lot more in there to actually mean members of the planning committee could say, well, okay, we sort of agree you can do the Wilden condition from time to time when there's evidence, but that wouldn't make me as a member of that committee think I actually know how to do this now. So I think there's a kind of training piece here, and I'd be interested to see if the cabinet would agree that some training could be done to the planning committee to help them with that and maybe take that report further. And as Councillor Bothwell said, you know, let's give examples of where it's worked and where it hasn't, and the kind of situations, the kind of data and evidence we need to see to bring that in. So it's just more useful and practical, because as Andrew Thompson said earlier, our planning officer there, actually, you know, you could bring challenges in and around this area before based on the MPPF. So just a bit more specificity would be really useful, I think, going forward, so we can actually move forward and do something productive here and sort of leave the political bit of this all behind. And then just a final question for planning relating to that really is, why does the KC say it's a remote possibility that you could use the Wilden condition? I appreciate in her report she refers to it's very hard to get the evidence to bring that about, but it wasn't clear to me reading through it. Why wouldn't you have the evidence base to be able to actually use the Wilden condition to put a pause on the development where you know, it has these water problems?
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Castle? Or yeah. Yeah.
Talk much tonight. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I made a promise not to talk much tonight, so I'm not enjoying myself. So the first 2 points, the KC mainly because we don't have the legal expertise as Cabinet, fundamentally. I think the decision was made by the Chief Execs to get somebody who is an expert in that field to work their way through the whole thing. So there may be an element where probably, and I read the report thoroughly a few times, and you're probably thinking, well, why is that bit mentioned? And I think probably of hindsight, but I think it was to be, as they are probably in their role, is to be all-encompassing, so to not leave any stone unturned. So I think that's the first part. I think the how-to guide, on the night of the debate, I did mention full council, obviously, that the chair of planning runs planning. So even though I oversee the KPIs, me and Simon Thomas liaise about enforcement and KPIs and strategic sites, I don't get involved in the day-to-day planning element. But I did mention on the night maybe training for the planning committee, so I definitely agree with that point. I don't think maybe we formalised it in Cabinet, so I'm hold my hands up and say maybe could we have said that as an additional point to the one we did on the night. The downside is, again, I think probably that should happen anyway. Probably doesn't need to be confirmed. We probably just need to agree with the committee that we're going to get some dates in And on the final point, the Southern Water bit, I think or the reason, sorry, you said that we wouldn't meet the threshold in this. I think that's the way it's implied, isn't it? Very loosely at the end of the report. I won't deny that. It doesn't maybe give the detail. I'll refer to Simon, but how I interpreted it and from the information we've received is that we aren't going to be told by Southern Water that we have a problem. And I know I've repeated that a few times tonight, but that's what they're telling us. I'm not saying that's right, because I'd like them to say we've got a problem in a way, and then we can use it to a stick to beat them with. But at the moment, they're not. And I think that's probably better for Simon to deal with. But
I actually have an application at the moment where I think for the first time, Simon, they have said there's a problem. Hillborough Industrial Park. Yes. I think so. We do have, it's commercial, but there are still lavatories have to go in because people, so I think we do have one of the first ones. Yes. So, so Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the Hill's actually a really good example where in the officer report, we advise the planning committee that there is no need for a condition such as this, even though there will need to be upgrades to the sewage system in order to accommodate the new development. And the reason there's no need for a condition is because there's a legal requirement on Southern Water to upgrade the sewage system to accommodate new development. There's a section 106, coincidentally, of the Water Industry Act, which requires Southern Water to upgrade connection if there's a necessity for that on application by the developer. So what we've said is this is covered under other legislation. However, in the case of the Hill, the planning committee was very concerned and in effect wanted to have an oversight of the design and upgrade of the sewage system. So in fact the committee proposed what we've been calling tonight a Wealden condition, but in fact is a Grampian condition. So the committee asked for us to include a Grampian condition to say, well, I'll read it in fact, just so you've... So the condition that the committee asked for in the case of the Hill was no development shall commence in any phase until details of the proposed means of foul sewage disposal for that phase have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and the development shall thereafter be carried out in accordance with the approved details. That's actually better than the Wealden condition in terms of its wording, stronger than the Wealden condition, albeit it's not necessary because there is other legislation that covers this off, but the committee wanted that assurance that they could effectively oversee through this condition that those upgrades were going to happen to accommodate that new development. So that's probably a good example very recently. Obviously, this case is now going to go to the planning inspector. Planning inspector might say, well, there's no need for this condition because there's other legislation that covers it. But the inspector might allow us to retain this condition. So that's probably the best example recently.
Thank you, Simon. That's very helpful. Sorry, Councillor Watkins, do you want to come back?
Just briefly, I mean, actually, that is very helpful, but I suppose I'm still a bit perplexed. In paragraph 27 of the KC report, the final sentence, she says, however, such evidence will rarely be available or exist, and it must be appreciated the evidence to justify the imposition of the Wealden condition may never arise in Canterbury District at all. But it's just, I mean, would you say, actually, that's, too pessimistic? And to be fair, I don't know how much she knows about the specifics of Canterbury District. Would you say that's too pessimistic, given you've just given us an example where, it looks like we kind of have essentially, used the Wealden condition, albeit you're calling it a Grampian condition, and albeit it might not be necessary, full stop. So you would be a bit more positive that it could be evidenced and thus used sometimes?
Well, I don't think it's ever evidenced and required. I don't think you can ever say it's needed because the Water Industry Act covers that issue anyway, so it's never needed. But you could justify it in the sense of there's some logic to it in that it's saying that there's a need to upgrade the system and we don't want the development happening until that's been established. You can kind of justify it, but there's no actual legal need for it ever. Yeah, so I think that's probably my response to that. I guess the KC is sort of reflecting that in her advice.
Thank you. Councillor Turnbull, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, are you saying then basically that Southern Water can't actually say that they have no capacity because under other legislation they have to provide, you have to upgrade if there is no capacity? Because if that's the case, then how are any of these councils able to put in these conditions and have them upheld on appeal or upheld by the planning inspector? So I'm a bit confused about that. And on that point, when I looked at the land of south of Thanet Way, which is one that I was involved in a couple of years ago, Southern Water in their letter said, we request that should this planning application receive planning approval, the following informative is attached to the consent. Construction of the development shall not commence until details of the proposed means of foul sewage and surface water disposal have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with Southern Water. But on that permission, there's no condition to that effect. And I'm a bit confused about that. I mean, I sat in on the Hill one as well, and we were sort of writing by committee, and that wasn't a nice feeling, writing things by committee. So it does need something doing. But basically, I'm not understanding why it feels to me as though Southern Water are sort of kicking back and are sort of saying we need to have more security on this before we start building on these sites. So yeah, I'd be happy if you could clarify that for me.
Thank you. Yes, I just think we need to be careful we're not drifting too far off from what we're supposed to be covering. But yes, if you want to just briefly.
So the case that you referred to, when was that? Was that quite a recent case?
2023.
Okay. I remember historically Southern Water would always ask for a condition to be imposed that is effectively like this Wealden condition. But over time, it was agreed, and I think probably inspectors pushed back on it, that there was no need for that because they have a legal duty to connect new development. I suppose there could be scenarios whereby they come back to us and say, look, we simply cannot possibly connect within the lifetime of that planning permission because the infrastructure that's required in order to connect is so significant that it will take us 5 years or whatever to connect. Or even, say, for example, in a very rural location, they might say, well, we're never going to connect to that because it's just practically impossible. In those cases, then we would need to get involved quite clearly because the wastewater solution wouldn't be a connection to Southern Water facility, at least in the short term and possibly in the long term. So at that point, we'd need to look at what other alternatives there are for wastewater treatment. So whether it's on-site treatment works, mini treatment works, or cesspits or whatever is necessary. So there might be occasions where technically it can't happen at all, or more likely it can't happen for quite some period of time. And we have in the past had discussions with Southern Water about in those instances. So say, for example, they said it was going to take 2 years to connect. We might then limit the delivery of the development to fit in with the likely timetable for Southern Water to provide those upgrades. So the development is slowed down effectively to match the timetable of the upgrades. So that's another scenario which might exist. It's quite rare because if you think about it, most developments, say, on the edge of a settlement is going to quite easily tap into an existing system, and there might need to be a few upgrades as per the Hill, but the infrastructure is already generally there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. And Councillor Forrester, and then I'll come to...
Thank you, Chair. Other councillors raised a few points that I wanted to speak about first. Councillor Campbell, you referred to the resolution talking about an investigation, but it actually just says a report, and that's quite crucial in terms of what was wanted and what came out. Councillor Turnbull then talks about reading the spirit of the motion, and there can be a spirit of the motion, but it's the words and the text of the motion and the resolution that need to be complied with. Councillor Watkins talked about the KC report, which I agreed was really clear, helpful and thorough. And KCs can be very expensive. I don't know the deal that was struck for that advice. But I would say, given the clear concern across council by all councillors on this issue voting unanimously in favour of the resolution, and the matter having been scrutinised here again tonight following the call-in, I think that's money well spent, because this is an issue that's clearly very important to all the councillors on council, and that's because it's so important to our residents in the area, and it's important we get it right. And I also noted that she talked about whether the condition was blanket or not, but I assumed, and others may disagree, so tell me if everyone thinks I've read this wrong, it's because the call-in talks about whether it was correct for Cabinet to, whether the report misrepresented the discussion. So I didn't think the case could have worked through the call-in reasons without addressing that at all. I think if she hadn't, we might have said she'd missed one of the call-in points. So it would be another point of criticism. I'm really glad the Hill was raised, because I sit on planning committee, and as Simon said, it was a matter that none of us were happy about, and we were desperately trying to find a Grampian condition, the Wilding condition, a way to express that dissatisfaction in a way that would be upheld. And I hope it's going to plan inspector, so I hope we got there, but I'm not sure we did. And that shows how tricky it is, because we had residents, we had the parish council, we had Southern Water saying they weren't meeting at the moment, they would when it was put in, because they would connect and comply with their statutory obligations. But we all had concerns, and we were struggling to find a way to express those in a effective way. So lastly, I want to say that's why I'm so pleased that there's been talk of a toolbox, toolkit, whatever we're calling it, whatever it's going to be, because that's what I need on planning. That's what I think my fellow councillors on planning need, not only so that these motions and conditions, should I say, can be put forward on planning, but so they can be put forward effectively, because that's the real risk here, that if we go forward without such a toolbox, we put forward the Wilding condition on the wrong case or put it forward incorrectly, we will just get challenges, they will get pushed back without any condition then going forward on the development, and without any protection for our residents and our district. And so I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Castle said lastly, because I know I'm going over, sorry, about training for councillors on planning. I'd actually want that to go further if other councillors would want to attend, and it to be open to all councillors, because we could all sub for someone, we could all be moved around on the committees, and residents will ask all councillors these questions at surgeries or in correspondence if they know this toolbox is there. And I think it is an issue for our area, and we all have to be aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forrester. I've got Councillor Butcher, Councillor Mackenzie, and then Councillor Campbell, but I'm mindful of the time as well, and we need to come up with a proposal. So can we, and Councillor Buckman, so can we try and be quite speedy, please? And if you and then we'll come to that point, because then we'll need to discuss that as well. So Councillor Butcher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 6, at the bottom, the call-in must also meet one of the following criteria. It specifies that the decision is claimed to be outside or contrary to the budget and policy framework. We know that is not right. It specifies inadequate consultation with stakeholders prior to the decision. It specifies inadequate evidence on which to base the decision. It specifies that action is not proportionate to the desired outcome. It specifies a potential human rights challenge. it specifies insufficient consideration of the advice of the statutory officers. I'm struggling to find what Cabinet have done that warrants the calling for one of this criteria.
Thank you. It's in the call-in. It's in the report, in the call-in, and it was agreed
I know
by...
that. It's but it's the calling also meet one of the following criteria. Which one are they calling in? What yeah.
I can just clarify on that point. It was paragraph H, 3.2H. So it was specified that the decision is claimed to be outside or... No, sorry. My apologies. Inadequate consultation. Apologies. So it's I. Inadequate consultation with stakeholders prior to the decision. Is that right, Councillor Turnbull?
I and J, Jan.
I and J. Specifies inadequate consultation with stakeholders. I don't think they asked for consultation. It was just to write. But I could be wrong. It specifies inadequate evidence. What evidence was presented with the motion, and that's what I'm struggling with. So I don't know why that it would be called in if it wouldn't meet one of the following criteria. But I bow to I and J.
Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Councillor Mackenzie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to run through one of the main reasons that this was called in this evening. So that was that the report to Cabinet misrepresented what the motion was calling for. However, the KC report recognised that, and Councillor Baldock reiterated this evening, that having analysed the live streams of the full council and the Cabinet meetings, that nobody could be in doubt, those were the exact words, that blanket impositions were not expected in the motion. Also, importantly, the KC report. Importantly, the KC report expressly clarifies that the council cannot direct the local planning authority. Indeed, only the national policy planning framework can do that. I got those words mixed the wrong way around, never mind. Whether blanket conditions were expected or not is not the point, really. The point is that we can't legally direct the local planning authority. And I don't know how we could achieve the stated aims in the motion without directing the local planning authority. It's been raised tonight that the motion, raised and accepted tonight that the motion was ambiguous in parts, and it wasn't quite clear on that point of how the stated aims could be achieved. So just for clarity, could Councillors Baldock and Castle please reiterate what you understood by what the stated aims of the motion was, just so nobody can be in any doubt about that. And then also, Cabinet members have revealed that they're putting together the policy toolbox designed to prevent further sewage pollution from future developments. That's been highlighted tonight this evening as well. And critically, the Cabinet and the KC report both recognise that the so-called yielding condition can already be applied to individual planning application on a case-by-case basis. So from where I'm standing, it does seem that everything the motion, the resolution, apologies Tom, it does seem that everything the resolution called for is already being worked on by the council or is already available to be used. So I was wondering if Councillors Baldock and Castle can please confirm that it was not a case that was said earlier of the Cabinet saying no and then not offering an alternative. It was a matter of we can already do it and we're already working on it. Can you please confirm that for us?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry, Councillor Mackenzie, I was going to say, I don't think we'll go all through the motion again because unless there's something that Councillor Baldock and Councillor Castle want to expand on that they didn't discuss earlier, because we have already gone through this and I have said this isn't about the motion, this is about, the call-in is about the Cabinet meeting, not the motion. So the Cabinet was there to discuss the motion that night. What we're here is we're calling in the Cabinet decision and asking for explanation. And you mentioned the toolbox, and that's what we're all saying. If it's available in the council, then why wasn't it discussed at Cabinet that evening, and why wasn't it in the recommendation? That's what we're here asking. So, you know, the fact that you know about a toolbox, I'm also a councillor, I don't know about a toolbox. So we're saying some councillors know things that other councillors don't know, which isn't correct. So yes, councillor.
Yeah, I think we wouldn't have known about it on that night because that's where the conversations come. We don't stop, you know, we don't go between council meetings. I mean, we keep talking, you know, we go, do you know what? There's something that we can do that's going to make this work better in the future. And that's where those conversations come from. You know, it's having those debates, it's having those opportunities to pull forward. You know, we, after the Cabinet meeting, saying, you know, there's something, you know, we're working on these things already, maybe we start to pull them together. So, yeah, I mean, as you say, it's sort of slid out, if you like, in conversations about, you know, more outly. But I think it was always something that come out of those debates right up after the Cabinet meeting as well. So there's, I'm not ashamed of that. I mean, I'm not, you know, afraid of sort of saying, okay, look, we can do this better. Sure we can. You know, it's okay. But it doesn't mean to say we made a daft decision on the night. I think we knew what we were trying to do. My understanding of the outcome that we were trying to, there was no point in putting a condition in to re-say what we could do anyway, which was we can apply gramping conditions, providing the criteria are met. We've always been able to do that. You know, do you want me to restate what the planning committee can do anyway? That's not what you call for. Planning committee, you know, could do that, have always been able to do that. And why would I restate that as well? You know, it's just there. The additional item was that we would pull forward those reports and look at those more from Southern Water. Perfectly good thing to put forward and highlight we're doing it. I really think, so the outcome was that we're more than happy for the planning committee to have used those gramping conditions if they felt it was appropriate, reasonable. As you know, Mr. Thomas has said tonight, you know, there's one occasion when it was appropriate to do it, by the sounds of it, and that's fine, or something very similar. We've always been able to do that. Do it. You know, some of you are on planning committee, though. When in the interim, until we get our act together, putting all those three things together, that's the Reg 19, the government's infrastructure bill, and the current, you know, legislation, local plan, we can work something in that interim period, I'm sure, but going forward there'll be something a little bit more solid. But that's really how I see it, to be quite honest. I wasn't in any confusion at the end of the night. I thought that's what we'd achieved, and I thought it was actually, for those people that put forward the motion, I actually thought it's a pretty good outcome, quite honestly. So it's obviously, clearly I was wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just really responding to something that Councillor Forster said, where I used the phrase investigation rather than report. I think the report was investigating all those options, and we've used the phrase tonight, toolbox, quite a lot. But it's relatively new to a lot of us. I think what we were expecting in proposing the motion was that the report would be the path towards that toolbox. And I take the point that you made earlier, Chair, that we've been surprised by the announcement of tools coming forward, but we were expecting those in the report as part of the due process of how we run, and that hasn't happened. So I really loop back all the way back to an hour or so ago when Councillor Bothwell addressed the Scrutiny Committee. Really, we don't believe that the report has delivered what was required from the original council motion.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. And Councillor Buckman.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, it is actually regarding carrying on with toolboxes and tools and things. I don't actually believe the toolbox is empty at the moment. I think we do have things in this toolbox that maybe you aren't aware of. I mean, I understand, we already have earlier engagement with water companies on planning applications, They have the sewage capacity assessments. I mean, I've just listed a few, that's why I'm reading like this. Phase development could be linked with infrastructure delivery of these systems. We also have the sustainable drainage systems as well. So there are tools there that can be used. But what I would like to pick up is, I think, what Councillor Forrester and actually Councillor Watkins said about extra tools or extra training. I mean, if we had, and it is difficult, that these tools, everything is always case by case. So I think in one way, going back to KC, he was right, or she was right to say about this blanket condition. I think the point really has to be cemented into everybody's understanding that isn't possible. But with these tools, I would like to see, or maybe if you've got time, go back sort of the 12 months of planning application, or 12 months of the main planning applications, and see what sort of conditions we've applied to certain applications, seeing how they've worked, or where we've failed in the conditions, or didn't apply them correctly, and where they've been appealed against, or we've had knockbacks towards these conditions. So I think going forward, then we would have these conditions, if they met a certain application, could be used, and we would all be aware of them, rather than sitting in committee thinking, oh, what sort of condition can we come up with? How do we word it? How does this go? And I just think going forward that might help. And again, but no, that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckman. Yeah, I think you make very good points. Councillor Baldock, did you? Oh, you're right. Okay. Right. So on that note, does anyone else have anything else they want to say, or can we look at a proposal, please? Does anyone have a proposal that they wish to make? As I outlined earlier, we have three options, although I do note that at our last call-in, we actually managed to have a slightly different option, or we amended one of these options slightly, which I will come to in a second. But our three options are basically that we'd take this no further and the decision will be implemented. And you know what the decision is, that receiving regular updates from Southern Water and ensuring councillors are aware of the progress of implementation of the environmental enhancements being carried out by Southern Water under the AMP process. Or we send it to council with reasoning to consider, or we send it back to Cabinet to reconsider their decision. So yes, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. I mean, the reason we're here tonight really is that we read the report and we thought that doesn't explore this this condition in the way that we thought it would do. We thought that it would involve some consultation, discussion, consultation with the stakeholders as we laid out, perhaps Southern Water, perhaps developers, just to see what this would mean in practice. A chat to the Wealden planners, so how was this played out in practice, and gathered some information which would have a really informative report. Then we wouldn't be here at all tonight. Yes, get updates from Southern Water on their water management plans. I mean, that's something you do anyway, as far as I understand. So my proposal would be that the matter should be referred back to the decision maker, to Cabinet, for reconsideration. So I think that the report could be better written. We've got all these other work which seems to be going on, which we don't know about, in the toolboxes, etc. I think it was always the case that it would be viewed as part of a wider, box of tools, to carry on that analogy. So, yeah, that my proposal is that it would go back to. And
what's your reason? And can you give your reasons for that?
Because we don't I don't feel that there was a full enough consideration of all, as for all those reasons that I've just given, that there was a full enough consideration of the of what the condition is, or how it works, how these conditions work, and how they can be used and how they can be implemented in this council, how they are being implemented, how they're being successfully implemented and upheld. As we've been saying all night, really, and as Councillor Buckham just sort of alluded to, having something which the planning committee can understand about how it can deal with these problems with sewage removal in the district. Now, does that make sense sufficiently, Chair?
Or for all councillors, perhaps. Councillor Baldock, yes, sorry.
Thank you for that. If I just clear one thing fairly straightforwardly up, I think taking the point about making all councillors much more aware of the opportunities for Grampian type conditions in certain circumstances with the necessary training, I think, you know, I can quite happily say that, you know, we make that happen, you know, because I think I'm more keen to make sure that we open that out so that we can go train for the future as well in a slightly different, you know, world that's coming forward with planning conditions as well. So that's an ongoing thing, and I think we're quite happy with that, and we reflect on that, and that's fine. One question I will ask actually is of Simon and Andrew, how many times has a Wilden condition been successfully applied in planning case law in the last, say, 5 years or something like that? I get the impression that Councillor Turnbull believes that it's a common condition applied by councils up and down the country daily, if you like, that is sudden. I mean, in those areas, it's making a difference because we had a viability done of this, and the answer was it's not viable to do, and therefore we answered the question in the motion, which I'll sneak over Lee's shoulder. The motion brings formally proposed, urges the Cabinet to commission an urgent report into the viability of implementing those proven Wilden planning conditions in this Canterbury district. And that was what we were asked to produce in the report. It wasn't a complete and utter review of our planning application system, which is something that seems to be implied that we've somehow missed the point. So, and that is really fundamentally, goes back to what Councillor Butcher raised earlier, it's sticking to the point of what we were asked to do. I think we did it actually quite fully in that report, and the case here has proved that we did that. So just with that question about how many times has the Wilden condition been applied, really?
I don't know the answer to that without looking at the detail, but we rarely put that condition on because it's not necessary for the reasons I mentioned earlier on. As I say, we only need to put a condition on if there's going to be some delay in the upgrade to the connection. I mean, that's the only reason you need to do it. Otherwise, it just happens under the Water Act. So it's quite the Hill was quite unusual, and it just came out of the debate. And in fact, it's an example of the planning committee, developing that condition themselves. You know, that they, in effect, saw a problem that they wanted to address, and they felt that the condition was the way in which that could be done. So it actually genuinely came from the planning committee's concerns, and that's the case with all conditions. Really, is that they need to address a problem. So you need to know what the problem is, and then you address it by a condition. So it's not just putting a condition on blindly. It's very much responding to an issue that needs to be resolved in planning policy terms.
Thank you, Simon. That's really helpful. And I think what we're all talking about here as well, I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Baldock, is forewarned is forearmed. So, and go back to what members of the planning committee who happen to be on here, Councillor Forrester and also Councillor Buckman have discussed as well. It is just knowing, having those tools available to you. But Councillor Baldock, yeah.
I was just wondering whether Wilden Council actually been successful in their use of the Wilden motion, as well as other councils like Oxfordshire, and that have they achieved what they wanted as an outcome? Because that's clearly what we wanted. That was the viability report was supposed to, reflect on those achievements as an option that we could go down, balanced against the ones that we are going down, if you like. So but I think the answer, I think I know that, but I'll let you just fill the details in if you.
Yeah, Andrew.
I think our latest understanding is this condition has only been applied to a single permission on this specific case, and as you know from the appeal, obviously the attempt to discharge that condition was rejected, and that was upheld on appeal. So to date, the decision that condition hasn't been discharged, which means effectively the permission is stalled and the condition hasn't really been effective in delivering mitigation as yet. So obviously there's a watching brief there to keep an eye on that over time.
Councillor Turnbull, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I don't want to keep dragging this on, obviously, but I mean, I think that your responses, both sort of suggest that you're not fully aware of how the Wealden condition is or is not working in practice. And I don't think that, Councillor Baldock, I presume you're not saying that the report concludes that it is not viable to use it. I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're saying that. I'm not under the impression that this is being enacted all over the country and we are just the little pocket that doesn't have it. It's not what I'm saying at all. So what we've had is a discussion about how this can be in the toolbox, and that there will be a toolbox and there will be some training, there will be some gathering of information, etc. How do we sort of capture that as if we don't want this to go back and they're writing another report, if we want it to be, how do we capture what has been sort of committed to tonight if we don't send it back to Cabinet?
So what I want to ask is that we did with Park and Ride when we had the call in, we didn't send it back to Cabinet. What we agreed here at Scrutiny was that we wanted to be notified ourselves, and so that we asked and voted on that, however, that this additional training and toolbox for all councillors, that is agreed, and that comes back to this committee to be noted and notified and discussed. And I don't know if everyone would agree to that rather than sending it back to Cabinet, because I don't know. My personal feeling is that we could do this within the Scrutiny Committee rather than having to send it back to Cabinet and then potentially having to come back again, because it's us that are interested in this. And we also have March the 4th, we have our water, we're focused on water. So it would, if that toolbox is being worked on now, that may well work. So Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. That was really useful. And I maybe just a suggestion in terms of the minutes of this meeting being sent to planning, the Chair of Planning, to bring home. I know Councillor Edwards will pick that up anyway, but as a message from us, about what we want to do and what we would like planning to take on from the discussions that have happened this evening and at the full council.
So before Councillor Turnbull, would that? Sorry, Simon.
I was just going to suggest that I think what's yeah, I was just going to suggest that what's really coming out for me is the need for a training programme to look at conditions generally, how we impose them, and also how we deal with wastewater treatment in the broadest sense, because in planning we deal with it through water management like SUDs and so on. So there's a much bigger picture that we can explain to members, and then this condition, you can see how that fits into the overall, I suppose, toolbox. It might be a way of describing it. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it's the context of it, and we can train on that, and we can set that training up in the next couple of months.
Thank you. And I think, as well, as I said, forewarned is forearmed. If we are starting to see cases where Southern Water is asking for conditions, even if it's commercial at the moment, then if we've all had this training and we all understand the opportunities and the pitfalls and whatever, then we're in a better position, aren't we, than we've been. Councillor Turnbull, did you want to come back on that at all? Would you be happy to accept that?
Yeah, well, yeah, ish, yeah. I in a way, I mean, I don't want to create, you know, but I still feel that we want to encapsulate that, being informed about how other councils are perhaps pushing back when they know that there are issues with sewage removal and water capacity in their areas, even though, as we've heard, it's very, very difficult for these sewage companies, for want of a better word, to state and to uphold that they under capacity and that they are going to struggle with the connections. That, you know, I've been reading through quite a lot of stuff, obviously in case law and stuff as preparation for this, and it seems that its way of giving planning authorities, the planning process is a way of saying there's a problem here and there's something that needs to be addressed here. And I want to make sure that this council is doing its bit in using those tools that are out there to say, even though the water companies cannot say, we can't do it, or we can do it, but we're going to get more sewage in the sea, we're going to get more issues around this, that we are taking our responsibility to our residents and using these conditions when we can put them in, even when the water companies are saying everything's hunky-dory, but everybody knows that it's not hunky-dory. Okay, so I think if I'm capturing that properly. So I want to just make sure that it's not just training people on how these things work, but it's actually thinking, as a responsible council, how do we make sure that this is, that we are doing the best for our local area and for our residents. Thanks.
Sorry?
Because the training is fine, and I'm happy with all of that. But fundamental to that is the belief that we have to believe, we have no choice but to believe, that the water company has said yes or no, or they've said condition or whatever it is. You know, it's not for us to preempt the water company's decision. You know, we can't say, well, we don't think you can do that, so therefore we're going to put a condition on you because we don't think you can do it. We think you're a liar. Because that's what it's broadly speaking would say, wouldn't it? We think Southern Water are lying to us and we don't trust your judgment. And we just can't do that. That's just not fundamentally, you know, that's the wrong thing to do. I can't go around calling water companies liars. That, you know, that's, you know, whether we believe it or not, that's just not what we can do. And I think that's you know, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. We all might believe one thing or the other, but we can't say it. Or we can't say that we know better. We don't know better. It's not our sewage system, is it? If we run it, it would be our problem, but we don't. Southern Water run it. So that's, I think, is a big difference.
But I think also we're getting a bit bogged down again. These aren't issues that we're looking at here now, because those are issues that are very much up for the members of the planning committee, that they would discuss and decide on the night at a planning meeting with the guidance of the legal team and the planning officers. So I think, yeah, Councillor Turnbull, that is going off, we're going just off at a tangent a bit there. I think Councillor Butcher, sorry, did you want?
I was going to propose that this committee takes the advice of the chair, or words that the legal representative has, and we take a vote.
Okay, so well, let me just go back to Councillor Turnbull. Is that okay? So what we're saying is that the leader has agreed and head of planning has agreed that they will work on a training programme looking at application of conditions, water management, how would the condition fit, and various other things into a toolbox. So we want that to come back to scrutiny to know that's been done and how it would be applied and when it's being applied. And then that will be reported back to us through the minute. at the next meeting, which is March the 4th.
Yeah.
Is that?
I'll just clarify that we need to take that back, I think, and have a wider discussion. We've heard exactly what you would like to hear and receive, but I think we do need to take that back and have a wider discussion with the relevant teams, and then report back under the minutes of this meeting at the next meeting, if that makes sense.
Which is March the 4th.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
I've heard your wish list.
Yeah.
We need to get that checked and report back.
I think I'm with Jack. I think, yes, this is what we will do. I think, but because of the ever-moving field that we're facing over the next sort of 3 months, I think we need to be bold enough and just brave enough to say, look, we come back to you with some basics, the understanding of what's going on. We can come back there relatively quickly, I guess. But there will be an evolving situation over the next 6 months, maybe a year, where until we get that, conditions correctly interpreted, so that when we go to a unitary authority, we actually have a very clear understanding of what the conditioning is that goes with our local plan. And that fundamentally must be the case too. And I think we could achieve that, actually. And our planning committee can be trained up in that interim period, because they'll be sitting for another, 3 years probably. So that I think is important to do that. So yeah, same thing, but obviously evolving. And I guess if with your permission, Chair, you could come back once or twice to the Scrutiny Committee if it needed to, couldn't it? Just to keep abreast of the changes that are coming forward.
So, sorry, yes, Councillor Turnbull.
So as part of that and what we're putting together, could there be, could we have a commitment to have a sort of review of how Wealden type conditions, gramping conditions are being used or have been used, and how successful they've been, to inform the training of the planning committee, so that they know it may be that they don't work in these conditions, it may be that they do work in these conditions, it may be that they never work ultimately. It'd be good to be able to know if it is an actual tool that can be used.
So, so can I ask then that the chair and vice chair of the Scrutiny Committee are kept updated on this as you work through it, so that the questions that Councillor Turnbull raises there, that she is kept informed of that programme. Would that be acceptable? Yeah.
It's the wish list, and
yes.
we'll report back at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. So, okay, so what we're agreeing then, if everyone agrees to this, or I will propose, if someone wants to second it, is that we have a wish list, which we have head of planning here and the leader here, who both have said that they will need to work through it, but they accept that these are valid and good points, I hope. So we have a wish list, which is additional training, a training programme on how to condition, so that there's a programme of how you would be able to condition, water management, how does the condition fit, and as Councillor Turnbull has just said, how has the condition been used, has it been successful or unsuccessful? We have the example of the hill with the condition there. Are there other conditions? Have we been using conditions ourselves? So I think we've got a whole wish list there, and that will go off now to be discussed by officers and the leader, and an officer will then report back to us with the minutes at the next meeting, which is the March the 4th meeting, which coincidentally is the one where we're looking at water issues. So it will, some of this probably will come up anyway again, and it will be very timely. Does that sound acceptable to everyone? Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you, Councillor Turnbull. So we need to vote on that, do we? Yeah. Yes, so we'll vote on that then. Thank you. Yes, sorry. We're so in this we're not referring it back to Cabinet and we're not referring it back to Council, but at the same time we are we have some changes that we want to make to that decision. So we're not referring it back to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Just to scrutiny, exactly. Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Right, okay, if we're all clear on that then.
Carried unanimous.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. I think it has been a really good meeting because hopefully we've got something very positive out of it for all of us and for our council. And we are scrutiny, so we will keep holding to account. And I think as anyone who's followed on Park and Ride, we don't just forget it and give up. we keep going. So, but thank you very much, Councillor Baldock, Councillor Castle, for being here tonight, and also Simon Thomas and Andrew Thompson. Thank you very much as well. So I will see you all on March the 4th.